and take one from that and put it on the side, like between either the top and the middle or the middle and bottom.
Oh, like this?
Yeah. So
Okay.
then those two connect, and then you can take another one from the same square and put it from the middle to the bottom.
Like that?
Yeah. And then take the last one from that square and put the middle and the bottom.
Oh, on the other side? Oh, so we have, ooh, I'm going to use different
That
colors.
right there.
I like it. I like it. I like it. Okay, so now I have one large square. And for the sake of using the entire rainbow that Zoom has offered me, I've got a small square. Sweet. I like it. So that was exactly following the rules. 3 matchsticks to make 2 squares. Nice. Thanks, guys. Thanks for playing. You guys are great. So daily puzzle, check. I'm going to clear my annotations so that doesn't get really annoying. And I'm going to show you what else we're doing today. So here's what we've got. We are going to start off by taking a look at your graph somethings. Why, you might ask? Because they're great and I love them. You guys graphed some really funny, interesting, odd things. And you guys also, I'm pretty sure almost every single thing that I wrote a comment on, I'm not going to call them mistakes. I'm going to call them things that you did that were interesting. So all the things that you did that were interesting were very much shared. So like the same few things kept on happening and I want to get a chance to talk about those. So without further ado, let us graph something. Look, I made a presentation. Where the authors are you? Okay, so somebody decided to graph TikTok usership over time like I suggested. So shout out to that person. One thing I want to bring up, and don't worry, this is not somebody in your class, so you can feel free to comment how you would like. Kindly, though, that would be cool. There's one thing about this graph that I'm kind of questioning, and I want to put it to the group. And that is, this person chose to include in their graph a year where they didn't know the usership. Would that be the choice you would make? Why or why not? Should we include data for a year where we don't know? And if you're not really sure, think about like, what does that do to the way the graph looks? What information does it imply, maybe? Yeah, I agree with you, Nora. So like, I wouldn't, and it's okay that this person did, but it kind of sends the message that this number is 0, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I would just leave it out. I would leave out 2016. I agree, Aaron. So yeah, it implies that usership is 0 in 2016. So I would leave it out. Maybe usership was 0. I don't know, but we could just start here. And I like this graph though because it shows a difference between the Instagram example that I shared with you guys on Monday, where it took like 7 years for the usership to grow. This just like snapped up. It got to the same usership in like basically a year. So I think the graph is great for showing that. Guys, I really love this one. This one warms my soul, makes me happy, and personally, I feel better educated knowing that Diet Zesty Blood Orange was invented in 2007. Like, I just feel like a more informed individual now. This is great, guys. So this person decided to graph Coke flavors and their development over the years. I really like this one. I think it's awesome. This is probably the best data table I've seen in my entire life. What do you think is great about this graph? Would you say that the graph or the data table is more informative? Message me in the chat. Would you say the graph or the data table is more informative? I got a lot of people saying the data table.
Data
Does anybody disagree? You think the graph is more informative? So the data table certainly has information about like every single flavor that is available at each year described. Now, if I wanted to get a sense of the trend in how many flavors there were over the history of the availability of Coke, would I get a quicker assessment on that by looking at the graph or looking at the data table? If I just want to know, like, you know, when did flavors start to be developed? Yeah, I'd probably look at the graph. Because the graph, I don't have to look at any numbers whatsoever. I don't have to read anything. I can just see this. You know what this graph reminds me of? It reminds me of the human population graph we looked at. Because it kind of like is steady, steady, steady. And then remember they invented the wheel. Somebody invented the wheel and suddenly we're flying. Humans are populating this earth like nobody's business. And we had a really big uptick. And that's kind of what this graph looks like to me. So I get a better picture by looking at the graph, but you're right that there's probably more information looking at the data table. So there's a place for each of those. Let's look at another one. Guys, I just have so much respect for the fact that somebody decided to plot electric tea kettle scales over time. Why not plot that? So I wanted to include this one because first of all, it's fantastic. And second of all, this graph is a different kind of chart. What kind of chart is this? It's not a line graph like everything else we've looked at. It's a bar chart. Yeah. Is there anything wrong with a bar chart? Is a bar chart a reasonable way to represent this? I agree, Katie. Yeah, it's fine. Fine. Looks great. It totally displays the sales of electric tea kettles. Now, let's imagine, though, that I want to plot two dependent variables at the same time. I want to look at two different animal species, and I want to see how their populations change over time, and I want to compare them. Should I use a bar chart for that? Tell me in the chat. Tell me out loud. I'm getting some no's. I'm getting some no's. So I agree. So bar charts can be really useful, but once you want to start trying to graph multiple dependent variables, like two different populations over time, it gets really busy and really chaotic. And so if you chose to use a bar chart, that's wonderful. But what I'm going to ask you to do, and what I asked you to do in the comments on your graph something assignment, was go and make sure that you know how to change the settings to a line graph, because that's going to be something that you need to be able to do. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just is something that I want to make sure you guys are all able to do. And somebody's telling me use another color. And coding in colors can be a really good tool for making graphs easier for your viewers to interpret. But still, when you're graphing multiple things and you have multiple bars of different colors, it still gets pretty busy. And we'll look at that in just a moment here together. Guys, I included this one because it's just so wholesome, and like somebody graphed chicken tender consumption and it just made my heart really happy. So if you were wondering what this person's predictions were for how many chicken tenders people of various ages eat per year, I just want you to like soak it in, smile, and now we're gonna move on. I want to talk about this one. Everybody tune in, look at this one. This is a really important one to learn from. Again, this is not somebody in your class, but what I want you to think about is, do we think that this graph represents the data that this person was trying to graph? What do we think? Probably not. That's what someone's telling me in the chat. Why not? What makes you nervous about this graph? Or here we can say, what made me really nervous when I saw this graph? It's too linear. Very good. So it looks like a perfect line. And let me just tell you something right now. Everybody feel my vibes. There's no straight lines in science. So like science is way too messy for there to be straight lines. So if you take one thing away from today, thinking about graphing, just know that you should fear straight lines in science. The only way to get a straight line is if you only have 2 data points. So we need to figure out what went wrong in this process. And Veda, you're on it. Should the axes be switched? Yes. So this person correctly identified that their independent variable is the year, but we know that independent variables should go on the bottom, on the x-axis. So yes, they should be switched. What else? If this person entered their data just like this into Google Sheets, what might be a problem? Or in other words, what are they expecting that Google Sheets is smart enough to do that maybe it's not smart enough to do?
Know what a million and a billion is?
Exactly. Astrid, yeah, Chloe. So like, several people are telling me like millions and billions, like, so I can't type out million and billion and expect that Google Sheets is smart enough to deal with that. What could I do? How else could I express 1.07 billion? Help me out, y'all. How else could I express this?
Full number?
Yeah, I'd write 1,070, because that would be the number of million. So 1,070 million is a billion. So I went through and I did that. I did what Veda said. I switched the axes. I also typed all of these billions out as like 1,000 and something million. And there's what I got. Do we feel better about that? Does this look like it represents the data? Tell me yes or no in the chat. I'm getting some yeses. If I really wanted to check extra carefully, I could look for 2 data points here that look like they represent a bigger increase from year to year than years around it. So I could look at the increase between 2013 and 2014. That's bigger than the increase the following year. And so then I could look over here on my chart and I could say, is the slope between 2013 and 2014 steeper than the slope in the next year? And it is. So couple lessons learned from that one. This is the last one I want to show you guys. This one is like awesome. This person went above and beyond, and they graphed 2 dependent variables like we were talking about before. They graphed the high and the low temperatures for the South Pole at various days. And you can see here that their choice to use a line graph was really good because it really clears up the data. Instead of having a whole bunch of bars next to each other, which looks really busy, we've just got these nice points that are connected with 2 different colors. So I think Chloe mentioned using different colors, and I really like that here, how it's very clear and easy to compare these data. So I want to show you guys how to do that in case this wasn't clear. Some of you guys on your assignment were like, I don't know how to like do this Google Sheets thing. So let's do it together really quick right now. So in my last class, they decided that they wanted to graph the wolf and bear populations in particular years. Those are the 2 animals we decided to talk about. Now I 100% made up these data. This was like me just like typing random numbers. But what I want to show you is that here's how I organize it. I had my independent variable. I always put that on the far left in Google Sheets. So if you were having trouble, notice that Google Sheets will always put the left column on the x-axis unless you change settings. So I put the independent variable, which is the year. Now, I'm not going to highlight this part when I plot my data. This is just my organization. I'm telling myself what my 2 variables are, or in this case 3. So my independent variable is the year. Notice, guys, that here's a great tool if you're wondering. If you're getting tired of typing like 2001, 2002, 2003, what you can do is you can highlight 2 data points that are 1 year apart and pull this down, and it'll count for you. So there we go. We've got our years. I just plopped some numbers in here. I made sure to indicate that this was in the thousands. And then I can highlight this whole big thing, click insert up here. I hope you guys are watching. I'm trying to help. Insert and a chart. So once I insert a chart, notice that Google Sheets, it was like super smart. It was like, Ms. Bruin, I know that you want a line chart. But let's imagine it wasn't. Let's imagine that Google Sheets thought that I wanted some bars. So I thought I wanted some bars. And you can kind of see how this looks a bit more chaotic. It's not quite as easy to look at this data. And so I can click here under chart type in the setup, and I can change it to a line chart. And it's got these separate colors. It labeled my axis for me. So this is my quick demo on how to make that line chart in Google Sheets and how to make a line chart that has two different dependent variables. So if we look at this, so it looks like red is my bear population. What's happening to the bear population between 2002 and 2006? What is happening to the bear population on the graph between 2002 and 2006? Tell me in the chat. It's increasing, absolutely. So it's increasing. Now, let's just brainstorm together. What are some reasons that a population could increase? Super generally. I'm not asking for specific answers here, but how could a population increase? What conditions in an ecosystem? Tell me in the chat. I want to see an answer from everybody. Yes, Nora, a spike in birth rates. People are telling me food availability, so having plenty of resources. Yes, Veda, so removing limiting factors. So not having diseases, not having natural disasters, not having shortages. Aaron, absolutely, less of a predator. So if this species doesn't have a predator, then its population can climb. So some people are telling me birth rates, and specifically we could say birth rates being higher than death rates. That would allow our population to increase. Another one I'll add, we're gonna jump ahead here. I made a little list, and this is basically what you guys just said, but populations grow when birth rates are bigger than death rates, when immigration is bigger than emigration. Does anybody know what emigration means? You know the word migration. Okay, A-lunch students. You know the word emigrate, or you know the word migration, and if you put an E in front of it, we're talking about organisms leaving a population. So as long as more organisms are coming in than leaving, our population grows. And then you guys hit on this one hard, resources being abundant, or there being plenty of them. So you can see that in the graph right here of this reindeer population. The population goes up, probably because there was more births, and there was more immigration, and there were more resources, and then it goes down. Now here's my question for you. Tell me yes or no in the chat. Do we know why the reindeer population plummeted around 1937 by looking at this graph? Do we know why? I'm getting a whole lot of, come on, when I say I want an answer from everybody, yeah. Everybody. Do we know why? I'm getting like, no. You guys are right, we don't know why. But let's look at this graph on the right. Now we've got yeast cells, and we see the population starts to climb. Now it's really climbing here in the middle. Notice that our time scale here is in hours, not in years like the reindeer. So yeast reproduce really fast, they're growing, and then it tapers. It hits this maximum population, which is also known as Who's got me? What is the maximum population size known as in biology terms? Yes, carrying capacity. Woot. So we've got maximum population being hit. Now in this case, everybody who can turn your camera on, turn a camera on. I'm looking for a 1 or a 2. Show of, I don't know, fingers. I want cameras on. Cameras on. Bottom left, it's this nice video camera picture. Give me a 1 or a 2. Did this population of yeast cells stop growing because 1, it ran out of resources, or 2, it ran out of space? What do you think? 1, resources, or 2, space? I got some 1s. I got some 2s. 1 is resources, 2 is space. Why did this yeast population stop growing? Oh, wait. Somebody who gave me a 2. Why 2? You're correct. If you said 1, you weren't alone. You saw your peers. There were plenty of 1s. If you said 2, why did you say 2? Why do we know this yeast population ran out of space? Why do we know it ran out of space? Fantastic, Aaron. Okay, so here's why. When things run out of resources, we climb, we're doing great, and then they run out of resources, and the population's got to fall because we can't meet the needs of that now really high population. But our yeast cells, they just seem to have hit this carrying capacity, and it just tapers off, and we're still up here at a high population number. And so that tells us that they're not dying, so they must have enough resources, enough nutrients, probably in their little petri dish. There's just no more space for new organisms. So in this case, in this graph, we actually can tell. So sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But there's a lot that we can learn from just looking at these graphs if we think about them pretty carefully. So this was that idea of carrying capacity. I just wanted to point out using this picture that can a population get bigger than its carrying capacity? Absolutely, totally can. But then what needs to happen is some of those organisms have to die. And so that's what we see here. We have this thing called an overshoot, where the carrying capacity is exceeded, or the population gets bigger than the carrying capacity. And then we drop, and the carrying capacity is actually greater than the population size because some of these creatures probably didn't have enough resources. Now, if we go too far over carrying capacity, you can have some damage to an ecosystem if a resource is so overused that it can't be replenished. And for those of you guys who thought about overexploitation in your human impacts part of your biome project, that's kind of what we're looking at in some cases. If we harvest so much of a resource that it can't grow back, then we're looking at actual permanent damage to an ecosystem. So what questions do we have about what we've seen here with these population graphs, with carrying capacity? I'm looking in the chat for some questions that you have so far. If you don't, then here's where we're headed. We are going to turn your new expertise about graphing in a direction where it actually helps us understand biology. So we're going to look at 2 populations. We've got a snowshoe hare population, and we've got a lynx population. And we're going to put those populations on the same graph so that we can analyze the interaction. You guys know about predator-prey interactions now, but we're going to analyze that using a graph to get even a better understanding of this biotic interaction. So you will find in Canvas that there is a assignment in your, let's see, today is Wednesday. Just checking in on myself here. So today's Wednesday. You can see in this calendar that we shared our graph something, and we are now looking at this predator-prey graph analysis. So you can click right here, and you will find that I already made the graph for you. You're welcome. And this activity is basically just asking you several questions about analyzing a graph that shows a predator and prey population together. Now, I want to put this up because here's how you sort of check in on yourself. So this might take you, for some of my students yesterday, this took them about 12 minutes. So this might be something that's really intuitive to you. You understand the predator-prey interactions and you've worked with graphs before and you finish these questions very quickly. When you finish though, I want you to check in with yourself and say, am I ready if I were to receive another graph with another population and some similar questions, would I feel confident completing that as a quiz? And that's what your sort of finishing point needs to be for yourself is, am I at that point? And I say that because what we're gonna do on Friday, Friday's our shorter day. We're not gonna have a whole lot of time together. And the thing we're gonna do is we're gonna sort of tie this together. I'm gonna give you this short Canvas quiz that talks about a different population using a different graph. And you're gonna have some very similar analysis questions. I don't think it will take you long at all. But it's the kind of thing where, like, if you feel confident doing this graph analysis, then you will be just fine. It's basically the same thing with a different population. So I want you to sort of use that to check yourself and see if you're ready. The only other thing you have on your plate is your biome project. And you know, we're done here in like 10-ish minutes. And so I'm gonna give you this time to, number one, start on this analysis, maybe finish it if you're like super speedy. And number two, I'm here to answer any questions you have left about your biome projects. So there's a couple of you guys I'm gonna check in with about the biome projects, but this is time for you to ask me questions and make sure that it's in a place where you're feeling confident turning that in, you know, by the end of the day today. So if we need to talk, let's make sure we do that. So you're not logging off just yet. Stay with me here. You can mute me and put me in another tab if you want to get started on this graph analysis if you feel confident. But otherwise, I'm here to answer your questions. So I am going to stop sharing my screen.